short minute. Great. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining in our virtual continental tour on Latin America. My name is Rocio Cadenas, and I'm your session host for the Bosch Alumni Network. And after having some enriching conversations around the world, talking about migration and humanism in Europe, climate force displacement and migration in Africa, and how to work on an inclusive approach to migration and development in the 2030 agenda, we wanted to bring another element of discussion. And we wanted to talk about today about the limitations of the refugee system in Latin America with the regional displacements due to conflict and violence. And before we begin with the presentations that we have prepared for this space, I want to invite to take the floor to Rachel Bichet, host of the Bosch Alumni Network Migration Impact Field. So Rachel, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so like, I just requested that we start as people keep on joining. And welcome to this session, Latin American. My name is Rachel Bichet. I'm the Impact Field host for migration for this phase 1. And we've had like 5 sessions about migration and refugees. And I'm happy that we are going to the Latin America. So having this session, we have concluded all places in all the continent, like in Europe, in Africa, everyone. I will also like to invite you officially to this session. Let us come up with open mind. Let us be ready to learn from the other side so that we can compare the similarity, the differences, and how migration and refugee is working out in the other sides as we compare to others. Then again, after the session, we will be compiling a learning document that is a knowledge hub that we've harvested from all the session and be able to share with all the participants with the knowledge about migration and refugee. Thank you. I want to pass it over to Sarah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you very much for the invitation, especially to Rocio. Can you hear me all well? Okay. And of course, thank you to Bosch Alumni Network. Well, my name is Sara Peligros, and I'll be the moderator in this opportunity. For me, it's a pleasure to share this space with you. I'm sure we are enjoying the session in which basically, as it's been said, we will focus on exploring key challenges of the international protection and refugee system in Latin America. We'll try to analyze the situation through the exposition of one case study, the Northern Central America, Mexico, United States corridor. 2 main speakers are joining, Rocio, sorry, and Armando de Paz. Rocio is an internationalist, public policy analyst, and specialist in development cooperation programs. Some of you all know her, with an emphasis on the promotion of human rights in contexts of poverty and inequality in Latin America. And Armando, on his side, is a lawyer and career diplomat with experience in issues related to diplomatic and consular law, asylum, refugees, rights of internally displaced persons, human trafficking, migration, and human rights. They're going to help us to look at how we could address this phenomenon of forced displacement to give effective responses and develop mechanisms to go over the limitations for refugee support or make policies within local communities and countries in the region. Both are Salvadorian and have extensive experience, as I referred previously, including personal experience on the topic under discussion and on the reality of the region itself. First, Rocio is giving us an overview of the context as well as the significant facts about the whole migration problem in Latin America. Afterwards, we are listening to Armando, who is presenting the case of the Northern Triangle of Central America, that is El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, with the extortion and violence as a trigger for displacement and forced migration. During the session, I'll be available to share information via chat if needed. Please, if you have any questions for the panelists, just, well, I will try to answer it in the last part of the conversation also. You can ask raising your virtual hands and, and you'll have the chance to intervene if so. Well, let me now give the floor to Rocío again.
Thank you very much, Sara. I'm going to share my screen so you can take a look at the presentation that we have prepared. Just one moment. And I want to ask Sara if you can confirm that it's visible for everyone. Can you see it?
Okay, yeah, it's okay.
Great. So hello again. Before we, thank you, Sara, for the presentation. And before we dive into what brings us today, we wanted to provide you with some context on Latin America. So I'm going to be talking about the context, some regional agreements, some migration, and in some data that we have available, forced migration and the Venezuelan situation, just a glance of it, and how migration is being portrayed as a problem here in Latin America, and offer some conclusions that we can discuss after the presentations. So when we are talking about displacement due to conflict and violence, much like in recent years in the 2021 ranking of the world's 50 most violent cities, is littered with urban centers in Latin America and the Caribbean. The top 8 are all in Mexico, which you can see right here on the map. And a total of 38 cities are on the list. So there are patterns or clusters around the continent that warrant further attention. So from Valle del Cauca, a department in Colombia, to homicide spikes in Mexico tourist towns, the arrival of Ecuador, the acute concentration of violence in northern East Brazil, as you can see right here in the map, and also the high homicides figures in Central America, which is, as Sara discussed, Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. So while a majority of new displacements are caused by armed conflict, others have been forced to flee their homes by criminal, communal, or political violence. So organized crime, criminal violence associated with drug trafficking and gang activity has driven high levels of displacement in Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, for example. And protectedness is an unfortunate feature of displacement due to violence. For example, despite a peace agreement, Colombia remains home to 4.9 million internally displaced people. So it's imperative to raise awareness of the issue at the highest levels and to promote support for those affected. And that's why I wanted to bring this quote from Renato Vini, Regional Director for the Bureau of the Americas for UNHCR, which states the Americas is experiencing one of the biggest forced displacement crises in the world. Yet the humanitarian responses remain considerably underfunded. So solidarity and support for the international community to countries receiving refugees is needed more than ever. And especially when there is a progressive trend since 1990s with which the international refugee system has weakened and acceptance of migration has decreased. So there is a security and control concept that surrounds migratory processes on a global scale, including Latin America. So there have been increased incidents of hostility to intra-regional migration around the region, including stronger restraints in one of the most important corridors in the world, with the northern Central America and the southeast of Mexico and United States. And those without regular residence permits have little or no access to essential services such as education, healthcare, or COVID-19 vaccinations. So with border restrictions on the rise and restricted asylum processes, people left with no other choice continue to follow dangerous and irregular routes, increasing their risk of exploitation or gender-based violence. In addition, the severe economic slowdown undermined efforts to achieve socioeconomic inclusion, and combined with public services pushed to the limit, fueled the spread of xenophobia. So we can see in this scenario that the international protection system falls short for situations such as violence and conflict, which are among the biggest drivers of migration in the region. So here, throughout the exposition, we're going to talk about one type of migration that is called displacement or forced migration. There is no formal definition for this type of migration, although I put one there from the guiding principles of internal displacement. But there is a consensus that this type of mobility brings together three elements: coercion, human rights violations, and absence of state protection. So we are talking about a wide range of situations and categories. And that's why I wanted to bring or to talk to you a little bit about the agreements on a regional level to face this type of migration. So throughout the 21st century, several legal dispositions have been approved by Latin American countries to welcome and protect people that have been forced to flee their countries due to several reasons. And despite their diversity, all these measures are framed within the complementary protection category. So these mandates are based on humanitarian considerations and provide only temporary protection, and to a great extent depend on the state's discretion or will. So we can identify some features of all the legal dispositions that you can see right here on the screen. So first, they are usually directed at dealing with transnational exodus. So secondly, a large part of these provisions adopted have consisted of the creation of humanitarian visas and residence permits through which temporary reception and protection is offered. Asylum and refugees have played a very, very residual role. And finally, these are unilateral constructed responses. I want to focus on one of them, which is the Cartagena Declaration on Refugees, established in 1984, because of its importance. Is a soft law instrument that has played a central role in the construction of the refugee definition in the region, because it has adopted a broader concept that then established in 1951 when the Refugee Convention. So this means that people who have fled their countries because their lives, their security or freedom have been threatened by general violence, foreign aggression, internal conflicts, massive human rights violations, or other circumstances are included in the definition, like serious disturbed public order. Some other legal dispositions that we can highlight are the Brazil Declaration and Action Plan, which is the first legal instrument that recognizes that transnational displacement linked to disasters and the effect of climate change pose a significant challenge to the region, and also contains commitments to maintain the highest standards of protection for refugees, internally displaced people, persons, and stateless persons in Latin America. Then we have the San Pedro Sula Declaration, which is important to recognize because it included the creation of national action plans, but constructed with the help of multi-stakeholders. So you had government-led consultations, but you had the participation of UNHCR, United Nations teams, representatives of civil society, private sector, and academia as part of a comprehensive approach. And finally, I wanted to highlight the Quito Declaration, which is the first declaration of the Quito process, signed by 11 countries that commit to facilitate the movement of Venezuelan citizens, refugees, and migrants, and urges the government of Venezuela to take measures to provide identity and travel documents for its nationals. So where are we today? And here we have some data. So when we're talking about this type of migration, which is forced or displacement, we can identify 4 different types of categories. So we have refugees, and most of them have found shelter in neighboring countries, almost 73% of them, which brings down the myth that most refugees from the global south travel to northern countries to seek asylum. For the period of 2020-2021, the UNHCR of Americas registered 2.6 asylum seekers. And then we have 4.8 million new displacements, which is internal, and represent 11.8% of the global total. So, and almost 240,000 of them are results of conflict and violence around the region. And then we have a different category, which is quite different, which is the Venezuelan displacement abroad, because the causes of their flight are complex and do not easily fit into the conventional definition. People continue to leave Venezuela to escape violence, insecurity, and threats, but as well as lack of food, medicine, and essential services. Since the migratory crisis, we have almost 6 million Venezuelans living abroad, which is the second largest crisis of external displacement crisis in the world. So we already talked about some characteristics of the Latin American government's approach to this type of migration. And we talked about how asylum and refugee have played a residual role. So despite for specific exceptions, it has been considered that those who leave their country of origin or residence due to conflict and violence do not meet the necessary requirements to obtain international protection. So why does this keep happening when we have a soft law instrument like the Cartagena Declaration, as I told you about, which opens the possibility to enlarge the refugee definition? We can take a look at what are the positions that can be identified when migration issues enter the political agenda. So first, as you of course all know, migratory movements have been constant in the history of humanity. However, there is a growing position that questions this with greater intensity. So with the criminalization of international migration as a political tool. This is done through placing migration as a power struggle between them versus us, creating division and polarization regarding the issue in receiving countries. So these discourses establish a relationship between international migration with violence, with terrorism, the destruction of local culture, the collapse of social benefit systems, and the monopolization of the labor market. and are used to promote migration policies based on the defense of the borders and national security. And to be a little bit more clear with this, I wanted to bring you an example. So I'm going to show you this clip of former President of the United States, Donald Trump. To give you some context, on October 13 of 2018, a group of people, almost 1,000 of them, or over 1,000 of them, left San Pedro Sula in Honduras, bound for the United States to seek asylum. And almost 10 days after, around 7,000 people were part of this caravan of migrants that was arriving to the Guatemala and Mexico border at that time. So I want to show you this very short clip on what President Trump has to say about it.
Rocío? Sorry, can't hear you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to share the presentation again. And can you confirm that you can hear it?
At this
now?
very moment,
Great.
large, well-organized caravans of migrants are marching toward our southern border. Some people call it an invasion. It's like an invasion. They have violently overrun the Mexican border. You saw that 2 days ago. These are tough people in many cases. A lot of young men, strong men, and a lot of men that maybe we don't want in our country. But again, we'll find that out through the legal process.
So.
But they've overrun the...
Okay, so you can see that obviously President Trump's tone and message differs from the opinion of most Latin American authorities, as Trump was known for his inflammatory messages, but there is a clear relationship established. A relationship that established that migrants continue to be linked as criminals. So why does migrants continue to be linked with this definition and narratives? Why does violence and conflict are not taken into account to provide international safety? And instead, these people who have been forced to flee their countries due to violence are now being pointed as the criminals. So we can find some explanation on how a situation becomes a problem according to the public's opinion, and consequently how this shapes the responses through political policies. So I want you to imagine a situation when migration makes headlines and goes viral around social media. First, you have a trigger. So it must be controversial and contentious issue in order to be taken by the news and media outlets. And for example, for the 2018 Central American caravans, the first approach of the media was, this is a migration crisis and invasion. And the second step is to provide a definition. So the more generic and simpler it is, the greater the probability of expanding to the public. So to this step is added the use of culturally rooted languages and symbols that are with a deep emotional connection or charge that promotes attitudes of approval or rejection through mass media circuits, and continue with the media coverage of the caravans. The definition was this. This is a group of people who defy and challenge Mexican and US government authorities despite warnings about detention and deportation. They are putting their lives and those of their families at risk, linking them to crimes of possession of drugs, gangs, disturbances. And as you heard President Trump, these are tough people, people we don't want in our country. And finally, when the matter is defined and placed at on the agenda of the political community, an answer closely related to the first definition of the problem is put into place. So for this case, for the Caravan migrants, the answer was this: policies and programs must be directed towards the securitization of the border. We're not talking here about giving protection to these people. We're talking about control and security and national threatened by these migrants. So just to finish this short presentation, some conclusions, and maybe we can talk about it after the whole presentation. So we are seeing that there is a progressive and restrictive interpretation of the refugee concept. So we can see that we have some legal instruments that can broaden the refugee definition, but they are not being used to give effective responses to forced migration. So also there's a failure to comply with the obligations to share the load. So it is not only that the global South hosts the majority of refugees, the resources it receives from international community to deal with them are insufficient. There is a trend of outsourcing the borders with which the principle of non-refoulement is at stake. So there's the concept of safe third country that has been developed to prevent the reception of these people. For example, you have the United States declare for some time Guatemala as a safe third country for Honduras and Salvadorians, and has developed and is up to today has programs with Mexico for asylum seekers for Northern Central America. And overall, there's a lack of responses for transnational displaced persons. So the refugee concept was not designed to protect this type of migration. So we have to ask or demand our governments to take instruments like the Global Compact for Safe and Orderly Migration that recommends that the states resort to figures such as humanitarian visas to welcome this population. So with this, I'm going to finish, and hopefully we can talk a little bit more at the end. Thank you, Sarah.
Sure. Thank you very much, Rocio. Very interesting data and approach to understand the public problems and reasons due to obliged migration and some relevant concepts related to the refugee system and its restriction nowadays. We don't have much time left, so maybe let the space to our next speaker, Armando. Please, Armando, the floor is yours now.
Thanks, Rocio. I just want to share first the presentation. Let me see. Okay. Can you see it, guys?
Yeah, all fine, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I want to start saying that I'm basing this presentation on a document that I made at the beginning of the year, and it's called Extorsión como detonante of de desplazamiento y migración forzada en el Triángulo Norte de Centroamérica. That means extortion as triggers of forced displacement and migration in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. And I was really happy to work on this investigation because they let me do whatever I want to do, to tell the story how I wanted to tell them. So it starts and ends in the same way, and it starts from the north to the south. And I want to tell it in this presentation by numbers, but also by cases. So the first chapter of this is we flee by the thousands. So this answers basically the question, how many Salvadorians, how many Guatemalans, and how many Hondurans flee each year. And I do it by, you're gonna see the next slides loaded of data, right? So stick with me, guys. So first, just give me a second. I just wanna, okay. So first, I want to start with the caravans that Rocio was referring to. And this is the timeline of the first caravan. 13th of October 2018, 160 migrants were in San Pedro Sula, that's Honduras. It's near the border of Guatemala. By the 18th of October, there were at Tecunuman 3,000 migrants. Tecunuman is the frontier between Guatemala and Mexico. And when they passed to Mexico, in the south of Mexico, they counted around 7,233 migrants. That was the count. When they get to the north of Mexico, in Baja California, they were around 8,084 migrants. A couple of months later, a new caravan was in Tecunuman. This was around 574 migrants. So this was like a huge explosion on media, but I wanted to look at least the last 3 years of migration trends, and two things happens after the caravans. Or during the caravans. Trump, that Rocio already put a video on how he feels about migration, and the pandemic, right? Oops. Okay. So the first thing I wanna address is deportations. So deportations in 2020 were, during the pandemic year, were 63.64% less than deportations in 2019. 2019 for me was the last, how do you say it, the last normal year before the pandemic, right? But by 2021, deportations numbers were up in 18% in relation to 2020. But it still was 55% less than in 2019. Okay, so even in the case of El Salvador, this 2021 number was even less, 30%. I don't know if I'm making sense. I'm sorry for my English. Okay, so that's deportation. Now we can see numbers of detentions in south of the border in the US in 2019, 2020, and 2021. And the trend is that in 2020, detentions were down 75% in comparison to 2019. But in 2021, they have increased 33% in relation to 2019. How many detentions? You can see the number there. 2019, a little more than 500,000 people. 2020 were only 135 detentions, and 2021 was greater at the end than 2019 at almost less than a quarter. Well. 732,000 detentions. And those are detentions in the border of the US. And if we can see detentions in all Mexico, we can see some trend, a similar trend. In 2020, the detentions were down 56% in comparison to 2019. But 2021, they have increased 25% in relation to 2019. And there you have the numbers. This is these are detentions all over Mexico. The previous slide was detentions at the south of the border of the US. And overall, in the last 3 years, 2019 to 2021, detentions of migrants of the Northern Triangle of Central America sums up to almost 2 million people. This represents, to have a comparison, the almost 60% of the population of Uruguay, for example. And Uruguay, it's in similar sizes of our countries and kind of similar population. This means of all these 2 million people, mostly were Hondurans. 46% were Hondurans, 39% were from Guatemala, and 13% from El Salvador. This represents the 9.43% of the population of Honduras, 5.19% of the population of Guatemala, and 4.26% of the population of El Salvador. So huge numbers, you know. If almost 10% of your population has migrated in the last 3 years, that's a civil war or a war type of crisis, you know. Of those detentions, of those almost 2 million detentions, almost 16% of the detentions were children under 18. But the number has increased of children from 2020, the comparison from 2021 to 2019. The number has increased in Honduras at 35%, in Guatemala at 46%, and in El Salvador at 20.55%. So that answers the question of how many people flee, because you cannot tell because we how many people actually made it through the border without being detained in the U.S. border, in the south border, and you cannot tell how many people die, and you know there's a lot of numbers going on and a lot of stuff going on the route. So you cannot say there goes 1,000 people every day. You can only check the numbers of detentions and that's basically and deportations that you have. That's basically it. So I don't want to. A lot of people make calculus of how many people migrate a day. I just base myself on these detention numbers. So the next question. So I know there's a lot of Salvadorians, Guatemalans, and Hondurans fleeing. So the next question is, where are they? Because if you go back to those stats, these numbers of deportees they represent really a small amounts of detainees. So only 23.85% during those 3 years have been detained, have been deported. So where are these people? And now we get to the asylum seekers numbers. This is, in general, asylum seekers from the 3 countries in all over the world. So from 2017 to 2021, we have 654,647 asylum seekers from these 3 countries all over the world. But mostly, as you can see, it's a little above 70% in the US. During the same years, only 72,255 were granted asylum. Most of them, 42%, in the US. Same years, 250,000, a quarter of a million, cases were denied. Mostly, 75% in the US. So we have corridors for asylum seekers in Europe, in Costa Rica, mostly Panama, Mexico, and some parts of South America. But most of the migration is going to the US. Why? Because the three countries, the migration history makes it the greatest place to go, because we have family there, basically. We have a support of friends and family. So we have a place to land, to go when you go there, right? In the case of Mexico, it's really interesting. These numbers from, I'm sorry. These numbers, I'm sorry, I copied I made a mistake with the same info, but you can see in the chart that Mexico, the asylum seekers in Mexico represents basically a micro universe of the consequences of all the conflicts of Latin America. You have Hondurans, Salvadorians, and Guatemalans that makes most of the percent of asylum seekers in Mexico. But you also have people from Venezuela, people from Nicaragua, and people from Haiti. And these people from Haiti are not people that live recently in Haiti. It's people that is diaspora. It's migrants that have lived in South America, Haitians that have lived in South Americans that started last year, this last couple of years, the migration to the US because of the hardening migration policies in Chile, in Brazil, in Peru, etc., in Argentina too. So that answers for me, where are all these people? Because they are not back home. Mostly are in the US, in Mexico, in transit, and that number of more than 500,000 people that haven't come back, it's a significant number. So the next question for me is, why do they go? Do they leave, and why do they don't come back? And this talks about the disconnection of U.S. policy, and I named this part "Do not come" with the reality of our countries. You know, this was a famous phrase that Kamala Harris made in Guatemala in her visit in Guatemala in the midst of last year. She repeated twice, "Do not come, do not come." But how can you tell, for example, a girl from El Salvador that is being victim of trafficking from the gangs, that they have an option in our country? They don't. So this talks about a lot about our disconnection. With U.S. disconnection with and Mexico disconnection with the Central American problem. And you have these programs Remain in Mexico, and this created a whole problem in the border, because they created Remain in Mexico and Title 42 created basically unofficial refugee camps in the south of the border. And these were self-run camps by migrants, because the US or Mexico weren't willing to recognize us as a refugee camp. So UNHCR had a little intervention on that. And at the same time, the Trump administration forced Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras to sign in safe third country agreements that they weren't implemented that much, only a couple of implementations in Guatemala, but it was a statement from the Trump administration to these three countries. We have a big IDP problem in the area, internal displaced persons by violence. You can see the numbers here. By Hondurans is almost a 250,000, Guatemalans too, and in El Salvador is a little more than 100,000 persons displaced, internally displaced. And subsequently, they don't find a means to relocate within these countries, and they convert themselves in migrants, forced migrants, because of violent reasons. I couldn't find a chart like this. If you see at the bottom of your screen, this chart, but this represents only the case of Salvadorians. I couldn't find it in Guatemala and Honduras, but when they deport someone, they make a little, how do you call it, una encuesta. Yeah, a poll, and they have this closed question: why do you migrate? So most of the times people say for economic reasons, but you can see the second and the third one usually is for security reasons and family reunion. But if you read deep down, a lot of these economic factors and family reunification, they have a lot of them has a security reason too. So here in our countries, the big number is homicides, and violence policy, security policy is based on homicide numbers, but this is not that true. So I put these two charts: homicide rates, homicide numbers from 2014 to 2021 in the three countries. And I didn't want to do it per capita because I want people to have the idea how many homicides actually they are, and you can find the per capita number everywhere. And also the economic problem, the GDP, and this is the GDP after the pandemic, right? And I talk in the document about a big, huge problem that is extortions, and has to do with the economic situation and the homicides. Because extortion is the most, the crime with most percentage in our countries. Because gang members, they rule over these communities by fear. I call it something similar like the Roman Pax, the peace of the Romans. You know, they conquer. After they conquer, everything was fine, but they collected taxes. So it's something similar like la Pax Romana. And you can see at the side of the slide how many gang members there are supposed to be in each country. So there are huge amounts of gang members. So it's not that extortions and gangs only affect economy because they don't allow business to grow, but the other side of the economics of extortion is that a lot of families depends on crime, you know, because these gang members have families and they all depend mostly on these gang members. So people used when they talk about gangs, like you imagine like this group reunited in a house and they never go out and they just go out to do crimes. That's not true. They live in their communities, they have families, they buy stuff, and they extortion people. So it's really within the society. It's a complex. It's a complex problem that cannot be just, this story cannot just be told about, by homicide rates. And that was the rundown of the whole corridor from north to south. And I wanna end the numbers with the last caravan that was this year on January 15, where I was still finishing this document. a new caravan was already in San Pedro Sula, and 300 of them were detained in Guatemala. If you've been seeing these little strips of comics during the whole presentation, I don't know if you have time to read them, but you can have the presentation afterwards. These are cases that we interview in Tijuana, in the camp, in the refugee camp, in the migration camp in Tijuana, and there were Salvadorians and Hondurans mostly that told their story. There are 6 stories in the document, but we have the strips for 4 of them, and it represents more than the numbers what people go through, you know. So I hope you can have this presentation and look at this visual aid, because it tells a lot of what families suffer when they are internally displaced first, and then they have to migrate from the countries. I didn't mention this at the top. I end up the document with some proposals. I don't know if they're recommendations. We have focus group in Honduras, in El Salvador, in Guatemala, and in Tijuana. In Tijuana, we have 2. One of them were with migrants. And my conclusion is that something similar that Rocio was saying, you know, migration is not a problem. The problem is the approach that we have. And the proposals go in that sense, you know. And they are not the whole solution of the problem, but we have to work on these issues to improve the situation of migrants in the region. And the first of one is combat corruption, you know, from all levels, from the highest level to the lower levels, in all countries, you know, in the 3 countries, in Mexico and the US. I want to give an example of a lower corruption act that it's currently that happens really always in the border and in Mexico, is the migrations officers, so police always extort migrants, you know, and this is a petty crime, a small crime, but it's so into the web of police and migration officers. And there's no response from the federal government or the local government to address it. The second one is better international and national legal frameworks and programs. Was Rocio was explaining I've been seeing the development of the regional framework, and I love the Brazil action plan. But then there did the San Pedro thing, the MIRPs, and then there did the covenants of refugee and migration. And the whole trouble that I have with all of that is that we should stick to the plan of Brazil. And the problem with the other ones is that they don't build on the plan of Brazil platform. So it's really hard to follow for all these countries, for UNHCR. And what happens here in the region is that they put aside the goals of the plan of action of Brazil, and they focus on MIRPs. And I think that's so incoherent. And also that the countries should adopt in their local legislation and in their local programs these international frameworks. The third one is training and sensibilization. And when I talk here in our region, I don't know if I think it's the same in other regions of the world, you know, in Africa and whatever migration is that the whole solution of cooperation is, oh, you know what? We should do some campaigns for migrants, for people that's going to migrate, to tell them how dangerous it is. And that's the whole disconnection. And I go back to Trump, I go back to Kamala when they say, do not come, the doors are closed. Well, these people doesn't have an option. And I think that sensibilization and training shouldn't go to migrants. Obviously, you have to do some campaigns to for migrants to seek to give them information for seeking asylum, and that type of stuff is great. But to tell them you don't have to migrate because it's dangerous. It's dangerous here in our country. So it's such a contradiction and it's such a disconnection. So the sensibilization and training has to go to be focused on governments, government agents, and cooperation, all the other stakeholders, and it has focus in migrants, because that's a way to clean your hands and say we're doing something, and we hope it works. Well, it doesn't work. The other one is development growth based on the education, social, and cultural rights, and that's working in the countries of origin. But I also, with the cooperation, I see a big problem. The whole focus is on reduce migration rates, and that shouldn't be the focus. Just focus on development, and that will the migration rates will lower on time by itself. But the whole focus of just reducing migration, even though they're aiming to this type of development, it's incoherent too. The other thing is monitoring and visibilization. This is data. It's hard to come aside to encounter this data. You know, detainees in Mexico, in deportees, detainees in the south of the border, refugees. We have some base, but I wanted to update this information 2022, and I was looking, for example, at the data from Mexico, detainees in Mexico. It varies a lot. So it varies a lot from the data that I checked last year. So that tells you something, no? I think also that dialogue and coordination spaces have to be more promoted. Here in the region, we have a couple of them that are managed by the IOM, the International Organization for Migrations. But I think that we need to talk more. We need to talk more, and we need to talk to migrants. We need to talk with NGOs. We need to talk to, this is not just a problem that has to be addressed, a bilateral talk with international organizations and the government. We have to create spaces where all can be heard. And the last one is the importance of civil society organizations and the advocacy that they do, but also the help they provide to migrants during the route. And I would aim most of the cooperation to these organizations, mostly the ones that are working on Mexico. So that's basically it. I know, like I told at the beginning, before you all connected, is that I'm proficient in English, but I'm not that eloquent. It's better when I do it in Spanish. So I'm sorry. So
no worries.
You can download the link. You can have this presentation. You can download the whole report in this link, and we're gonna update it. But the bad news is that it all is in Spanish.
Okay, yeah, I've already shared it on the chat. So thank you, Armando, again. A great presentation with multiple data and analysis to deeply understand the impact of the crisis in the Northern Central America countries and the struggle that represent these situations that you described for the population and for the local and regional governments and also for the rest of the stakeholders in these several systems, refugee systems, asylum, and I would like to ask if anyone, I think Caro has a question. If anyone else, Caro, if you please open your mic maybe, and you can share with us a
Thank
little
you,
bit.
Sara. Thank you, Rocio, and thank you, Armando, for trying to take us through this journey, the realities in Latin America. I'll introduce myself. I'm Carolina Scheinfeld. I'm also part of the Bosch Alumni Network, and I have not been able to participate in a lot of the discussions of the focus group, but I'm super grateful to Rachel for coordinating the hub for the network. I, together with Rocio, participated in the Mexico lab that the Global Diplomacy Lab led last year and co-hosted with Edna Martinez as well. And we were looking at this reality, and I think, you know, from the points that you've raised, well, I have a number of questions that I don't know if you can answer, but like in terms of like how do we, as you know, subject matter experts, then try to influence policy or changes in narrative, right? But just some provocations. I will first, you know, just tell you quickly that definitely a lot of what you said resonated with me. It came back something that Amparo said in one of our sessions, Rocio, on how migration will never end. So like if we start with that, like it's like, you know, how do we, you know, like be mindful that this is always going to be the case, be it because we are nomads, be it because like it's in our nature. So like how do we then take this in mind at the time of designing policies and like also of, you know, trying to change the narrative during the lab? So our focus was like looking at the nexus between development and immigrant integration, which is, you know, to your points about, you know, how, you know, migration is being seen as a problem rather than as an asset. So like how do we then, in designing policies, in creating community for them, like we also continue to promote that concept that it's like migrants and refugees like have a lot of, you know, resilience, have a lot of are bringing contributions to our society. It's something that in the US even before Trump, like it was a narrative that was trying to be promoted, and that's still, you know, because we are a country of migrants and like all this, but starting from like Armando pointed out, like civil society, like how do we involve them? How do we then like showcase this? How do we put the voices of migrants as well into this narrative that is not just the NGOs or like or governments saying like how great the migrants are doing, but also that they can speak for themselves. My question in the chat had to do with the numbers that Armando shared, and I know you warned us I was going to be having data, but in terms of, you know, these deportations, like these numbers are only what was collected by the Mexican government in terms of like formal detainees, but you have hundreds of thousands of people in shelters or like in informal encampments, like that there's not really a census of those. So like how realistic is this number, you know? So that was one question, and then I'll come back with some other thoughts for the group discussion. Thank you.
Well, how realistic are these numbers? I think there's a lot of, we call it el dato negro, like the black data that we don't know. And also that's true for extortions and in our countries. Because my sense in the case of El Salvador is that the numbers of deportees and detainees doesn't tell us the whole story, because we have a more sophisticated means to get to the US. We have more population, Salvadorian population there, so they have the capacity to pay more expensive traffickers, smugglers, not traffickers, smugglers. I'm sorry, I get confused the terms. But that has a lot to do with how many Salvadorians make it all the way to the US without being catched. And that has a lot to do of how many Salvadorians actually stay in the US when they are detained, because they have family that can pay a bond, and they have a migration date afterwards, or an asylum date afterwards in court. Maybe they won't show up, and that's true for the three countries. So we have this whole black number that we don't know, but that's why I don't want to. I don't like making this calculus of 1,000 people go out of our countries every day. That's really unrealistic. So that's what I base on the detainees and deportees, because that's the only certain number that we have. And that's how I can answer the question. Basically, it's a lot more than the numbers show.
I just wanted to add, thank you, Caro and Armando. Like, how can we bring like the voices of migrants? And that's why, I told Armando that he should show these cartoons that were made from interviews that were placed in Tijuana, right, Armando? So it's a very personal approach to the stories of migrants, and it's a different approach, because we see that when we talk about numbers, when we talk about human rights, it's not being heard, it's not being taken into account as we would like to, like the members of this group. So we have to find some other creative, innovative ways to share this information. Because as you can see in the whole stories, and you will see them when we share the presentation, these are stories, like personal stories of people who have to leave everything behind because their lives were threatened. And I think most of the people don't understand this if you don't have a near experience. So I think it's a very good like in terms of good practice, so we can maybe like take for the group and think outside the box to transmit this story, so we can change the narrative that it's currently right now around migration, and maybe focus on the reasons, like the very structural reasons that force people out of their homes into these dangerous routes.
Well, thank you, Rocío, Armando, and Caro. Sorry. Well, thank you everyone for your contributions. We are running out of time, and I'm sure we have strengthened our knowledge to build stronger strategies to face different issues concerning this obliged or forced displacements, and to revert somehow or attended regional and global trends in terms of people mobility due to structural violence and conflicts, as Rocío just said. Well, I don't know if anyone have a few last words or comments.
I think Harun had some news for our impact group, and we also wanted to ask you if you can turn on your camera so we can take a picture of the session.
Exactly, yes. Thank you.
If you can, of course.
Yes.
We know that the internet can be unstable. So if you can turn on the camera, so we'll take a picture.
For the whole group.
Thank you, Maria Elisa.
Thank you.
I don't know if Harun, Sharon.
Hello everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. This is Harun Modena from Kenya, Africa. I was assisting Rachel for the project planning and the management of the migration impact field. That's where we initiated the virtual continental tour. So far, we have managed to reach more than 5 continents. That's Africa, Asia, Europe, Latin America, and also a kind of intercontinental dialogue where we managed to bring some few experts from Africa, America, and also some part of Asia like India to trigger this kind of conversation and trying to document what the experts are doing so that we can address the issue of the gap knowledge between the professionals and also upcoming professional within and outside the Bosch alumni network. So the few announcements is that on February, we managed to host a co-creation workshop where our main goal for the co-creation was to tap the ideas and also to tap the intelligence of the Bosch alumni network members within the migration impact field in how best we can make sure that the migration impact field it's always on time with the key development issues, and also how best we can provide some of the updates information of what is going on and trying to build a kind of a knowledge hub, because we believe that we are so interconnected and we need to learn from one another, because Africa, they have a lot to learn from the Latin America. Latin America also have a lot to learn from Asia. Same thing. So that was the main aim and the main goal for the co-creation workshop. So we have managed to document the co-creation workshop. We have managed to harvest some key insights. And as we talk, we are on the final process. Tomorrow we are having a meeting with Bosch alumni network coordinators to present the report to them. And on Friday or early next week, we will invite you guys again to join, and we'll present these reports, ideas which were suggestions, and share with you the plan of action for the next 1 and 2 years. Then we invite all members to give their own suggestions. If the report is well documented, or if there's some things we have missed, because our main aim is to leave no one behind, and is to ensure that we are more inclusive in all of the engagement within the migration impact field. And also we will be looking some of the intersectionality, like the impact of the climate change with the migration, the impact of insecurity to migration, and other key issues which lead to this kind of migration issues. So we'll be looking at a different kind of things. Yeah, this is a kind of the announcements. So be prepared for an email and more updates coming soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for these technical announcements and explanations. Well, this is, I guess, a closing time. Thank you very much, all of you. Have a wonderful day and see you next time. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.